I don't know about you, but I always looked forward to mascot-based games. Mario, Sonic, Bonk, it didn't matter. They were always highly anticipated. So it comes to no surprise that the release of Bonk 3, Bonk's Big Adventure, was an exciting proposition for those of us who had a TurboGrafx-16. The sad part is, this was during the very end of the Turbo's life cycle, so the amount of people who actually played or even saw the game were pretty slim. It was even released in two forms, a TurboChip and a Super CD, and yet it is still one of the rarest games in an American TurboGrafx collection. Now both versions are pretty much the same, so let's pop them in and analyze this final installment of the Turbo's signature series. Well, it looks like King Drool was plotting to arrange his next attack while his grandson was screwing everything up in Bonk's Revenge, because he returns. Being very unoriginal, he steals half of the moon, this time chaining it to the bottom of the sea. You know, this family really needs a hobby. I mean, the whole moon thing, yeah, getting a tad old. Luckily, Bonk volunteers once again to take control of the situation and bonk his way to victory. Let's start with one of the major additions to this installment, multiplayer. At the beginning, you can choose between 1 or 2 players. Not only do you get the novelty of playing with a bud, but you can also jump on each other's heads to strategize, or warp immediately next to one another. This is a nice addition, although I still tend to feel that Bonk is better as a single-player game. Maybe it's because I have no friends to play with. That could be. Bonk still uses various headbutts as his major attack in order to defeat enemies, smash through breakable items, and bounce off walls. He can also ride flower helicopters, use his teeth for climbing, transform into a crab, and collect a bunch of goodies spread across the stages. Although there are not as many items as in Revenge, knocking the addiction factor of collecting them all down a notch. Meat, this time known as Ham, still acts as Bonk's main power-up, temporarily increasing his abilities. In fact, it works exactly the same as the previous game, giving Bonk a temporary freeze, ground pound, fire breath, and invincibility. New to Bonk 3 is candy collecting, which changes Bonk's size. The blue candy transforms Bonk into a Hulk that takes up a huge amount of the screen. This is a really cool looking gimmick, and he controls pretty much the same as regular sized Bonk, except he can't fit through some areas or grab onto walls. The red candy turns Bonk into Mini Bonk. In this form, he can fit through small areas specifically designed for him. Unlike the giant Bonk, Tiny Bonk serves more of a purpose, as some stages cannot be defeated or even accessed without his small pixel presence. This makes collecting the red candy of strategic importance. The candy rematerializes if he walks off-screen and comes back, so it will always be available when in need of a sugar rush. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. The bonus rounds return and can be played after finding the special tiny flower. When you defeat a boss, you can select between the 8 different rounds, and the amount of smiley faces you have collected act as credits. Now, the Super CD version does add 4 versus bonus stages, which can be accessed by finding the little doorways scattered around the game. You play against a friend in 2-player mode, or against the computer in a 1-player game. They are a fun little addition, with the waterfall chase being a favorite of mine. But they also don't make or break the Super CD version. I mean, seriously, the volleyball one just needs to end. Last but not least, the flowers make their third and final appearance and provide power-ups based on their individual color. Yellow equals spring, orange equals meat, blue equals extra lives or hearts, and pink equals food or a hidden enemy. Oh, stupid. New to Bonk 3 are the green flowers, which hold the transformation candy. Unlike in Bonk's Revenge, these flowers are static, which means you cannot change their color or bonk them to another position. A shame. Bonk 3 definitely pays an homage to previous games in the series, although sometimes it seems to just copy-paste. This looks familiar. That looks familiar. We have the mining caves again. There's the ship. Sometimes it seems there's a little too much repeated material here and not enough original to balance it out. You'll also find many familiar Bonk enemies that return. Now some of the new ones include Crazy Lady, Poison Fish, Crybaby, and Booga Booga. Nope, not making this up. Look, it's in the manual. Oh, and this little green son of a that steals your smiley faces? Don't even get me started. A couple bosses are large and unique, but truthfully, they are my least favorite bosses in the series. The overall look continues the cartoony design of Revenge and is pretty good. There are a lot of dull looking areas though, like right here. Now imagine being excited, popping this game in for the first time and seeing this plain grass area as your first stage. Wow, can we say disappointing right away? Luckily, almost everything else looks better, with excellent color and a very appealing set of graphics. I always liked the music in the Bonk series, and Bonk 3 is really no different. The Chip's music grew on me after a while, and I found myself humming a bit after the fact. Obviously, the Super CD adds CD quality music, with mostly remixed variations of the Chip's tunes, but some stages have a weird background sound thrown in, becoming somewhat distracting. In the end, I hate to say it, but I actually think I prefer the Chip, as it sounds more like a Bonk game. They're both good though, so it's up to you. The controls are just as easy to pick up as the previous games. Interestingly, the spin move has been sped up a tad this time and feels a bit more like Bonk's Adventure, which is good for those who didn't like Revenge's toned down spin. They also brought back the enemy juggle for continuously bonking enemies all around. Haha, I love this part. Even though it is not as exploration-filled as Revenge, Bonk 3 is still a pretty huge game. I found Bonk 3 handed me more one-ups than any of the others, and defeated the game without using a continue. Aside from a slight delay as the CD loads, which is very, very minimal by the way, and the addition of versus modes and CD music, the Chip and Super CD versions are pretty much identical. My expectations were a tad unrealistic when this game was released. While Bonk's Adventure is a much shorter game and doesn't have as much to do, it is forgivable because it was the first. Bonk's Revenge raised the bar a little too high, making for an epic experience all the way around. Bonk 3 was just a little disappointing, mostly due to a lack of enough reinvention and originality. But I still recommend it, especially if you're a fan of always using your head. By this point, the series is starting to feel a bit stale and really needed a lot of new stuff to make it exciting. Bonk 3 achieves this at times with an interesting two-player mode and a few extra transformation power-ups. The gameplay remains pretty fun, even though there is a little too much repeated stuff. There is still a lot to do though if you like the Bonk series, and the game makes for a fun afternoon. As for which version you choose, well, that's up to you. Bonk 3 Bonk's Big Adventure, I'm rounding up a tad to 4 Turbo Chips and 4 Super CDs out of 5, as we say a final and pretty decent farewell to our favorite head basher on the Turbo.